it was Hal's idea to do this topic. And in fact, the wording, it was kind of funny because I was picking his brain, trying to get ideas for the meetup. And he said, how about eliminating words like transformative and balance from your tarot readings? And I just started laughing. And then he went on and listed about, I don't know, 6 or 8 words. And I was like, I use all of those words in my marketing materials. But nevertheless, I'm like, okay, good point. We do need to be able to get practical answers from the tarot. And even though, I love all the spiritual stuff and the soul evolution and the onward unfolding into, infinite divinity, sometimes you just need to know whether or not to take the cat to the vet or if he'll get fine on his own. And so, which is one of the last times I had to do a reading on a practical level. So I wanted to kind of ask people, is this something that you've thought of before? Is it a problem that you've had? What are some of the things that have come up for you? And what are some of the difficulties that you've had, so I can make sure to kind of make sure I'm addressing everything?
Well, the reason that I suggested it in the first place was because, and you guys don't know me, but I was a tarot reader, and I say was because as I worked on it, and I worked on it for, how long did I work on it? 20 years? Something like that. My readings started just getting more and more and more vague, and sort of over a period of a few years, they just sort of dissipated, and they all got into transform, wait, ground yourself, be centered, be at one with your higher being. And I'm like, yeah, but I need to know this. And it wouldn't give me anything. And I felt like I am very clued in and tapped into my spiritual work. It was giving me vertical answers. It was giving me answers about the ideal realm. And that's all well and good, but I wanted answers about the horizontal time, space, real life answers, and I wasn't getting them. So I said, fine. And I stopped reading, and I don't read anymore. And I use tarot as contemplative material, and as well as a lot of other things to sort of meditate on, think about.
I think you mentioned to me, and maybe I'm confusing a couple different things that you've said, or a couple different stories, but didn't you say that even when you were working on the Pearl Street Mall, that that you were having trouble bringing it down to some really practical answers sometimes with clients too?
Well, yeah, and especially when I compare to your results, the way you read, and your ability to just be real life. And it's like, I'm not worthy. And so I finally just kind of said, my tarot reading days are over. I got out of it what I got out of it. I still get a lot out of it on the sort of metaphysical level, and using it for a meditation tool, contemplative material, thought-provoking, and writing prompts and things like that. I've written songs based on ideas from tarot cards, and that's satisfying me. And so I've just sort of moved on from reading. But then in answering your question, you came up with some ideas that it seemed like I better show up today.
Okay, cool. Anybody else have any thoughts on that or experiences that they'd like to share?
Yeah, I'm a bit the same. I mean, I certainly haven't stopped reading tarot, but I do find it difficult to get that really grounded answer. I mean, if somebody comes to me and says, I'm worried about my child, I don't know if there's a drug addiction problem, or I don't know if there's a mental health problem, or, and you get, as Hal says, be connected and like release to the universe. It's like, okay, we get that, but again, do we take the kid to the doctor? What do we do? Or how do we respond? What's our challenge to respond to it in a practical way? So I don't know whether there's two ways of reading the cards, and it's our approach to it. It's the state of mind we're in when we start reading them, or whether it's the deck we choose. So those are sort of some of the questions that I've got, Joy.
Yeah, perfect. And I covered a lot of those. So good. I didn't cover deck, so that's something we can kind of add to the agenda, because that's something to consider as well. Anybody else have any experiences they want to share, or solutions they've already come up with but decided to to come to the topic anyway?
I think the other thing too is it's almost, to me, like when what everybody has said so far, it's almost like you have to dummy it down for people. Yeah. And I know I say dummy it, simplify it, and be able to to get those answers, and sometimes the answer isn't that simple. So my thought would be, if I'm getting those bigger, if I'm asking a question, I'm getting those bigger answers, that it's not a simple yes or no answer. It's not, rolling within that. I mean, I can interpret it that way, but like I asked a yes, no question last night at like 2 a.m, because I couldn't sleep, and I was like, all right. And because I had something on my mind. And so I just went this, and it went, yes. And then, and other cards had fallen out, and it was like, yes, yes, yes. And I was like, okay, so I think that I think it just depends. And I think sometimes, I mean, in the sense of like, taking your cat to the vet, I think sometimes you have to go with your gut. You can't, to like put all your eggs in that basket of tarot is good, but we don't want our clients to do that too. They have free will, and they have choices to make, and you look at this as a guidance and a kind of and moving it this way instead of it being kind of in that mode. That's just my philosophy and thought process.
Yeah, and those are some really good points, and a lot of things that I've kind of haven't included in today's topic, but have addressed elsewhere in other presentations in the past and blog posts and things. And I really, for tarot readers, I do stress not putting, I like the way you phrase it, putting all your eggs in the tarot basket, so to speak. I really do stress following the cards, and it's a matter of, the more you trust the cards, the more they'll trust you back and give you clearer answers. And so I think there is a lot of value in proceeding with what the tarot's telling you. Doesn't mean that you can also do other things, doesn't deny your free will in any way, but you need to, but for the times when you really are struggling and really don't know, if you've always been able to put your trust in the cards, those times when you really can't determine on your own what to do, the cards are much more likely to come through for you. And I know not everybody finds that to be true or believes that or works that way, but for me, that's what has made the big difference for me. And so I actually do recommend going strictly with the cards. And the other thing I'll say is that not everybody, intuition works really differently for a lot of different people, and not everybody has that gut check, and so the cards are a way of overcoming that lack, and so that's another thing. We all have the capacity for it, but some people, for various reasons, it's wired differently. And so so being able to use the tool in the way that it's designed to be used, and again being able to imbue it with the trust and the faith that you would have in somebody super reliable, such as your own intuition or your very best friend or your mom or something like that. And however you think about this and however you go about it and however you work with your intuition, what we're trying to do today is figure out how to make tarot a more reliable tool. First of all, I went kind of through a phase like everybody's talking about, and the problem was that for me, my readings for myself usually tended to be pretty straightforward, but I got to the point with client readings where I was having trouble getting some, or not getting practical answers, but missing practical answers when I was doing client readings. And I started getting, I don't know, maybe not frustrated. Frustrated might be too extreme a word, but I was curious about how can I not miss the obvious. Like you pull the Empress card and your deck shows a visibly pregnant Empress, and 45 minutes into the reading, they're like, well, my wife's pregnant. Does that have anything to do with it? And you're like, yeah, that would have something to do with it. I missed that. Sorry. And I'm not going to read the Empress as being pregnant for every single person that sits in front of me, so I'm much more likely to miss it when it does come up. But there was just a lot of examples where I was missing really obvious things, and realized that I needed to be able to figure out when the cards were speaking to me on the practical level, of the literal level, and when they were speaking to me a little bit more metaphorically or symbolically. Well, one example that comes to mind, and there's so many odd occurrences, but I had a guy insist on asking about a friend of his, and I don't allow that. I dissuaded him, spent a lot of time trying to dissuade him from asking about that person, trying to rephrase the question into how can he help the situation, what can he do, things like that. He pretty much refused all of my suggestions and wanted to know if his friend was in jail. And she was in another state, and I pulled the Eight of Swords, and it shows a person surrounded by swords, which kind of look like prison bars. And my first thing out of my mouth was like, oh no, that's not about being in jail. That's about she's stuck. It's a mental level thing. It's swords. It's mental level. She's stuck in her mind. And then later on, I think after the reading was over, I was just like, Joy, she's in jail. Just tell him she's in jail. So trying to find the literal in the cards is one thing that I've been working on for a while, and I haven't necessarily, I'm not 100% there yet, evidenced by the fact that the guy's wife was pregnant and I missed it. But I kept saying kids were important. I did keep saying that, but I thought it was his existing kids that he had. What it will do today is I'm going to go through my 7 steps. I'll try to do that kind of reasonably quickly, and then we'll go ahead and do some examples. So one of my first things that you need it for every tarot reading, but if you're working on getting a practical answer, this is particularly important, is to keep yourself grounded and centered. The more in your mind you are, the more caught up in the emotions of the situation, the less likely you're going to get any kind of accuracy in your reading at all. But if you're an emotional mess, you'll get an emotional reading. If you're a mental mess, you'll get a mental reading. So ground and center and get into your physical body. Stretch, move, pull cards, and then take a walk and do your kind of interpretation mentally as you walk. Just get into your body. And even if you're not somebody that knows grounding and centering practices, there's always just the idea of making sure you have enough time, energy, and focus to be able to do a reading. And so, close the door, make a cup of tea, take some deep breaths, any of those things, anything that you would normally do to calm yourself or to release stress are good things to do before starting to do a reading. And the more grounded you are, the more grounded your readings will be. Set an intention. And sometimes this one gets lost as being a little more woo than it actually is, but setting an intention can just be a really smart way of setting a goal or setting a task for what you're doing. And so, tell the cards at the start of the reading that you want to get a practical answer. It helps the cards, but possibly, if you want to get psychological about it, possibly one of the ways that it helps is that it reminds you, and it's reaffirming in your mind that you want to receive that clear answer, and keeps you focused on looking for a clear answer. But I think there's more to it than that, and setting the intention works on energetic levels as well as just a practical or mental level. So set an intention. Expect to get the answer, expect to get a relevant, clear answer that answers your question. And that's where I come in with trusting the tarot. One of the things that I tell my students who are psychic or really strong intuitives is to, as hard as it is to please set aside your psychic and intuitive abilities when you're learning the cards, because most people advise when you're looking at the cards, follow your intuition, and your intuition trumps the cards. Well, you'll never learn to read that way. You'll develop your psychic abilities, which is awesome, but you'll never learn to read the cards, and they'll never be more than a prop for you. And so when you're learning to read tarot, or when you're trying to focus on doing a tarot reading for accuracy, set aside the intuitive and psychic abilities and only work with the cards. It might seem like you've, unplugged, or it might seem like you're losing some juice, but even though you're working from a different level, you will start to find how the cards work for you. And then later, once you get the cards and are good with the cards, then boom, you add in your intuitive and psychic abilities and you're unstoppable. And that's amazing. But really focus on getting clear answers from the cards themselves. And the more you do that, the more you will get accurate answers. And that's really huge. I think it's one of the reasons, I think that's one of my actually chief tricks, is that I never was taught intuitive or psychic techniques, only came into them much later in my career. And so, I just worked with the card images from day one without trying to overlay intuition or anything onto it, and that grounded me into being able to give much more precise, accurate, and practical readings. The intention that I set is always truth, clarity, and compassion. And it's a hard one. A lot of clients will try to override truth if they're trying to receive, if they're using the reading to calm their anxiety. They don't necessarily want the truth. And so if the client's intention is opposite to yours, that can undermine a lot of the accuracy to the reading. And then that can be verbalized, if and I'll have clients say, I just need peace of mind. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to do a reading for peace of mind. It's not going to be accurate, and that damages my credibility. I hate it, but at the same time, it's what they need. And I try to support my clients in terms of what they need. So, but that's what I ask for, is truth, clarity, and compassion. Hopefully the truth will come through, and I can say it in a compassionate way that also eases gives them peace of mind.
Can I ask a question, Joy?
Yeah.
So in that circumstance, could you do a reading? So, okay, we're not going to look at the situation that's giving you anxiety. Rather, what we're going to do is we're going to search for anxieties about how to lessen your anxiety.
Yeah, but And believe me, I go to great lengths to try to get people to switch their question.
Okay.
And some clients just won't do it. No, I agree, Lauren, and I think that's the best thing to do, but I think it's almost impossible with some people that really do get a benefit out of sitting with you, possibly more than what they're getting from the answers, however the answers are working out. So the next thing that I have on here is to ask practical questions. And and this is those of us that are more experienced, which is most people here, I think, are already pretty good about redefining the questions and making sure that the question is clear, that the way the question is phrased would produce a clear and practical outcome. People that are less experienced, or when you're just being a little bit lazy, we're more likely to say, what do I most need to know right now? What does the universe want me to know? What's in my highest good? And those are not going to give you practical answers. They might, depending on your ability to interpret, but chances are those kinds of questions are not going to give you clear answers. So try to really narrow your question down. I'm to the point, tarot is not supposed to do yes, no answers. I will ask yes or no questions, not expecting a simple yes or no answer, but expecting a tarot-like answer, which gives a lot more context to the yes or a lot more context to the no. And so I'm okay with doing that. I have a colleague / friend that wrote a blog post on that topic, or it included that information in another topic fairly recently, and she really focuses on yes no questions. So even though that's usually frowned upon, I don't mind it so much, and she actually encourages it. And that said, it doesn't have to be yes or no. Asking a simple question like, what is my next step? What is the outcome if I do this next step? Things like that are going to bring you much more accurate answers. An example that I had for this one is I was doing a reading for a client. She wanted to know how to resolve the conflict. And so we were all, highest good, and what does the universe think, and blah blah blah. And she phrased her question, was kind of proud of it, and we're like, okay, what's the easiest, most efficient way to resolve this conflict? And the cards see right through your questions. The card said, back down, just leave her alone. And I kind of looked at it and I was like, okay, this is not the answer that we wanted. We didn't want to know the easiest way to resolve this conflict. We wanted to know how you can get your way in this situation. And she's like, yeah. And so we rephrased it that way and laid out a new spread. And sure enough, boom, it went right to a really practical thing that she could do. She had not thought of it before. And boom, it seemed, obviously she couldn't try it then and there. I didn't hear from her. I didn't hear back, but it seemed really actionable, and like it would very likely produce the result that she wanted. So don't leave it up to the universe. If you want to take charge of something, take charge and ask your question that way. One of the things that's really useful, especially when reading for yourself, and reading for yourself, of course, is a great way to practice all of this stuff, is journaling. And I love journaling with my tarot readings. And journaling really does these first 3 steps. It helps ground and center. it helps you to set your intention, and it helps you to formulate your question. And most of my tarot readings, if I used to, now I'm more of a list maker, but I used to just journal and write all the situation that was going on and explain all the different stuff, and kind of get out all the just the static, and get the static out. And then I could go through what I wrote, really look at what's underlying the situation. I might come in with a particular question in mind, but as I journal about it, I can get down underneath it and find the better question. It helps you focus. It helps you ground. It's really useful for all of that stuff. So I really recommend journaling. Like I said, now I'm more like list making, writing down the things that I'm looking for insight on, breaking it down, pulling cards on each bullet point on my list. So the next thing I want to talk to, Lauren brought up the idea of decks. What deck are you using? And that definitely will make a difference. You know, the more, if you got a deck that has a lot of really practical imagery in it, it's much more likely to suggest to your mind practical results. And same thing, and kind of along those lines with the decks, I like working with positional spreads. And I kind of don't do that anymore. I showed you guys my 7-card spread that's up on YouTube. The split hexagram spread, and that's the one I mostly use. It does give an awful lot of information, although it's not strictly positional. It's got more general flow types of indicators as opposed to specific positions. But using a positional spread is much more likely to get you a clear answer. The more experience you get, the more you can pull your clear answers out of any type of spread that you use, or a no spread format. But if you really need a clear answer, and you're not getting it, go back and try your positional spreads again. And a really good way of doing a positional spread is simply to break a question down. You know, what happens if I take the cat to the vet? What happens if I don't take the cat to the vet? You know, how long is he going to be sick? You know, I can't think what the questions, why did he throw up? Is it the food, or is there something else? You know, you can bullet point all the things that are going on in your head, and then make those positions in a spread. Especially, I like doing alternatives. You know, what if I take the cat to the vet? What if I don't? You know, what if I hold my class on a Saturday versus what if I hold it on a Sunday? Gee, I wish I'd asked that before I launched the class. You know, things like that. So kind of break it down, use positions. They'll help you focus the card meanings. And while we're at that topic, the other thing is, you know, if you want practical advice, keep your spreads small. Smaller questions and smaller spreads are more likely to get target specific advice. I think 3 to 5 cards is plenty for a specific question. I usually use 2. I think 2 is better than 1, because 1 tends to kind of, you know, it's it's like Hebrew. Olive can be 1 or olive can be 1,000. And that's the way 1 is. It can be a single meaning on a card, but it can also open up to 1,000 meanings. When you put 2 cards next to each other, it really focuses in and reduces, because now there's only a few. You know, each card has all these rays coming out of it. Only a few rays cross, and where those rays cross is where your answer is. work with two cards together, they can either be like an if-then, if you do this, then this will happen. They can also just work on blending the two into a single meaning. Oh, I know my example that I use in my tarot class is that a card alone, there's a difference between a cat and a black cat. A cat is one card, a black cat is two cards. It really narrows it down and gives you a lot more detail when you use two cards. So go for the detail. Two cards is great. 3 to 5 cards is great. More than that, unless you're really, again, the more experienced you are at getting really practical advice, that's awesome. You can continue doing this with larger and larger spreads. But if the practical advice is eluding you, narrow down the number of cards that you're using. So now getting down to the actual nitty-gritty, those are all things that kind of help us set up to get a clear reading. Now we get to the actual interpretation. And this is where, you can do all those other steps, but if you're using an angel card deck that says, you are blessed and good things will come your way, and it's always worth it to try. you're still not gonna get your answer. So we want to be able to really interpret our cards from a practical viewpoint. And I said in the handout, I use the phrase evict the airy fairy angel messages from your deck. And so, and of course, the best way to do that, I'm really a strong proponent of using scenic decks or illustrated decks. When you're using scenic decks, they show a character, an animal or a person doing something. Find the action in the card. That action in the card is your to-do. The more you rely on that, and the more you notice that action and incorporate it into your interpretation and make it the dominant part of your interpretation, the more you'll get really solid, clear answers that are unequivocal. And if you're using a deck that is really beautiful but doesn't have any actions, you're gonna get really beautiful answers that don't have any to-do quality to them. And if you're using a lovely, inspiring message deck, you're going to get lovely, inspiring messages, but you might not get a to-do, a checklist item. So we want to stick to decks that have that are the illustrated, scenic, that have characters doing actions, that aren't portraits, that are action cards. And and you can find that on YouTube as well. We talked about that when we talked about how to develop keywords for your deck. We talked about the portrait, action, and archetype cards, and that's also on my blog somewhere. Find the action, and that will be your answer. Use keywords that you've already developed for the deck. When you need the most practical, real life answer to a question, it's not the time to go into deep meditation, to research all kinds of alternative meanings. When you want a practical answer, stick to what you already know. Think of your cards as a friend. They're not going to use vocabulary that you don't understand. You're not calling the help desk. You're actually talking to somebody that knows you, and they use vocabulary that you understand. If you ask a practical question and then turn to the Google Oracle to get your answer, you're going to get help desk ease that doesn't make any sense to you. At least help desk vocabulary hardly ever makes sense to me. So use what you already know. Expect that the answer that you need is going to be relayed to you in a way that you can understand it, because the cards are not trying to hide the answer from you. They want to express something to you. Kind of along those same lines is the other thing is that when you're asking the practical questions, the simplest answer is usually the right one. And because we have spent so much time learning all the spiritual components of tarot, and we know all of our astrology and all of our Hebrew correspondences, and we've worked so hard on our own spiritual development and our daily practice and our ritual work and all of that, and sometimes we have to step down and step back down to the practical level in order to get those simple answers. And that kind of leads into my last point on levels, but I'm going to finish up this point before I go there. We're going to get a simple answer, and it might not have quite the level of resonance that a deep spiritual answer would have, but at the same time it should feel accurate. It should still have a resonance. It just will resonate at a different vibration because it's at the practical level and not at the spiritual level. And so I think that's one reason why people tend to lose their practical answers, is that they're expecting all answers to vibrate at that same level that they work towards through all their daily work. And the truth of the matter is that those cards, the practical answers, are going to vibrate at a practical level. So take off your fancy robes and your nemes and sit down your pointy witch's hat. I don't know what you might wear in a ritual. Put your wand aside and put back on your tennis shoes and then interpret your cards and find out what answer vibrates with your tennis shoes and be like, okay, yeah, I got it. That's gonna work. Also, along the same line, that's another thing. I try not to always hit that your intuition is always right, because not everybody's is, to be honest. Some people need to work on it and work with it. And so this, people say always go with your gut instinct or your first impression, your first answer. And that works for probably 80+% of the population, but there's some people that it doesn't work for. So don't beat yourself up if that technique doesn't work. Journal it, write it down, refine it, keep it simple, keep simplifying. Take whatever answer you're getting and simplify it, then simplify it again. That will really help you get it, even if you are in the minority that doesn't have that super accurate intuition. And that leads into the last thing, which is levels. Break each card, and this was a solution that I found for myself when I had asked this question, was having those problems missing the practical in the cards with my clients, and I realized that there's the 4 worlds in Kabbalah. There's the 4 levels of being, which is the spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical. The cards work on all 4 of those levels. Even the major arcana have some just simple, plain, practical stuff in them. They don't have to be big life decision. They usually show up for that, but they don't have to be. I did one reading when I was just getting started. This was back in 1991. I did a reading where the I did a Celtic cross back then. That's what I used. And the vast majority of the 10 cards, probably 8 or even 9 out of the 10 were major arcana. And all I had asked, my sister's boyfriend had come over to visit us. I was living with my sister in Fort Collins, Colorado. My sister's boyfriend had come by, and all I had asked was, how was tonight going to go? And I get like 9 out of 10 major arcana. Well, I couldn't figure out what to make of it until the next day, and I looked over that spread the next day. Every single thing was a pun. Every major arcana was just making a pun. And it was, once I got it, it was like, oh my God, that's exactly how the evening went. But, I thought, oh, this is really significant in my development as a human being. No, it was not. But just remember, all cards have a simple interpretation that is relevant. So, your spiritual level of your card is going to be your big life concerns. That's where you'll find your messages, your inspiration and motivation. It's the why behind it all. It's the big picture. It's the big cycles. Your emotional level is going to address how you're feeling. It's going to be the angst, the part that is changeable, that advances and recedes or ebbs and flows. It's your intuitive response or your heart-centered approach. That's the emotional level. And one of the things that you'll find the more you work with this thing is that different clients tend to land at different levels. And so I tend to, my style, the client elicits the reading from me. And so my style changes depending on who's sitting in front of me or on the other side of the Zoom camera. And so some people get more of that heart-centered reading, as even though I'm trying to make it practical because that's what I want out of the reading, and it's because they resonate at that level and they elicit that from me. Same thing with the next level, which is the mental level. It's the psychological level. I apologize at the end of a reading if I did mostly psychological or counseling style. I apologize to the person. Because it's not a tarot reading to me. It's a counseling session, and I don't want to do that. I'm not trained to do that. I'm not qualified to do that. But sometimes the cards are psychological, and sometimes that's what people, again, elicit from the reading, is that they like being able to think about that. They like being able to talk about that. They like to be able to talk in that way. It's maybe what they're familiar with if they're already in therapy. Or if they're a therapist themselves, which I do get a lot of some clients, but more students that are psychotherapists. So that mental level can, besides being psychological, can also be the smart and clever. It's a new way of thinking. It's what we believe, and it's our logical approach to life. I'll give you a spread that helps to break this stuff down. One of the nice things about doing this spread is because it breaks it down into the 4 levels, is that you can contrast that emotional and logical levels. And it's really common in our society today to say, don't follow your logic, follow your heart, follow your gut, follow your intuition. And again, probably the majority of the time that's good advice, but it's really nice to be able to break it down and say, is today a time I need to follow my heart, or is today a time I need to follow my logic? And this spread really does that for you. And I use that a lot with really good results and can make that distinction for people. It's like, you need to take a logical approach to this situation, or you can follow your intuition on this one. And then the practical level is practical. It's the physical level. It's actionable. It's real, immediate, detailed. It's in your face. It will give you a next step. Now, like I said before, these answers sometimes seem curt, obvious, simplistic, but don't overlook them. Respect all things that the tarot can do. Just because the tarot can, invoke the divine into your day doesn't mean that it can't also, give you some really tell you what to make for lunch. I don't know. Give you some really practical advice and allow it to work on all those levels, and then you'll be able to receive answers on any type of question. I don't feel like I've truly mastered the always knowing exactly what level every reading's going to work at. Certainly, as the reading unfolds, I start to get a feel for what level it's tending to work at, and I can adjust if I need to and say, okay, we're getting psychological answers. Let's downshift and get down to some practical answers. Or sometimes, okay, this is giving you a lot of practical things, but you're already doing them. Let's upshift and gear up towards some more spiritual insight for you. or some such thing. One of the things that I do, especially at the start of a reading, is give all 4 meanings for a card. And I've got basically, so a couple times ago when we talked about developing keywords for your deck, I was like, well, you should develop your own keywords for all 78 cards for that deck, and probably for 6 decks. And so now I'm telling you that you really need to have 4 levels of keywords for every card in your deck and all the other decks that you use. So but it all evolves pretty naturally once you know what you're doing, and once you familiarize yourself with this approach to it. And that is, I just start, temperance is a really good example. Temperance by itself, very seldom does temperance represent, the temperance society. Does it represent abstaining from alcohol? However, it's one of the best cards to represent that. Very seldom, it depends on who you're reading for. Very seldom, I guess what I was saying was very seldom by itself does it represent that. Usually temperance combined with the King of Cups or the 9 of Cups is how it comes up for me to represent overindulgence in alcohol or drugs or anything that is escapist, and goes under that kind of addiction type of quality. So I usually would bring that meaning out for temperance when I had it come up with the King of Cups or the 9 of Cups. That's another thing, is just card combinations can help you refine meanings. I don't have a specific set of card combinations. I just read what falls and how things are interacting on the table. However, I did have a couple times when I just had that sense of, you better bring this up. Maybe because temperance had shown up in the advice position, probably. And I said, sometimes this can represent, overindulgence or addiction to drugs or alcohol. Do you or your partner have any issues with that you're working on or that you're denying right now? And it'll come out to be, I was getting yeses often enough that I started bringing that up more often, not just when it was paired up with those other cards. So that's just one example. The pregnancy thing with the Empress. If I'm reading for a young woman, I'm much more likely to bring it up. When I'm reading, for a guy that already has kids that are, not young, they're not old, but his youngest was maybe 6, it didn't occur to me to bring that up. So I'm much more likely nowadays to start the interpretation with, on a practical level, this card means this. On other levels, it means this, this, and this, and kind of lay out the different levels in the first spread that I do, addressing the first few cards that I address. As I refine, as we get into the spread and as the spread unfolds, and as the client, sometimes if they respond, that can be useful, but even if they don't respond, as I bring the other cards in, sometimes it does refine itself and start to settle into a particular level. But my advice is, if it's not doing that for you, that's totally fine. Do what I do and just tell the person or yourself all 4 levels and figure out which one is bringing up the best resonance and the most accurate response. So that's kind of my topic. I thought that maybe we could pull some cards or do some examples.
What if it's like just a very general open question, like, where am I heading in the next 6 months? Is that too open?
Okay, no, that's good. And I'll tell you, Maru, what I do with questions like that is I put the time frame on it. And so in that, and particularly, under normal circumstances, well, we can always kind of ask where we're going. Obviously, the world is a little bit different right now, and so that's a much bigger question mark right now for more people than it normally is. And my solution to make it practical is to put the time frame around it. And I usually suggest to people 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years. It depends on what the question is and some other things, but putting the time frame takes a vague question like what is my life purpose? Not that we can't address that, but that's going to be on a spiritual level. If we just want to know what's happening, narrowing it down to a time frame is really good. The only other thing I would say is, in what area of your life are you most interested in? Family, career, money, business, relationships. And if the answer is all of them, we might want to break it down into the ones that are the most important for you. Again, what you expect, and this is how this is how some of this works, what you need to get from the cards is going to depend greatly, is going to affect how you phrase your question, is going to affect how the answer comes out. The most practical answers will come from refining that and say, how do my relationships look over the next 6 months? How does my money situation look over the next 6 months? How's my career going to evolve over the next 6 months? And break it down like that. Do you have a particular focus that you want to refine that question to, Maru?
Yeah, it would have to be career. But as you may or may not know, I have like 3 different careers, so that can be complicated. And
Okay.
what if I want to have a yes or no answer? Like, is this taking off? Is this project taking off? What does this project look like?
I super recommend that. And so I like to break it down. And if there's multiple careers, there's multiple projects within a career, I absolutely will break it down with a client and we'll outline each one of them and pull cards on each one. So yeah, just like that. Which project do you want to look at first?
For example, my acting career. Am I going to be making movies in the next 6 months from here to January, I guess it is?
Here to January, yeah.
February.
Through February. And but so let's go ahead and do that. Focus on the question. Do you have your deck with you, Maru?
I do.
Go ahead and focus on that question. It's like, how does your acting career look over the next 6 months? Shuffle up, keep a strong focus on that question, and then cut the deck. And I always take, once I cut the deck, I take the top card and the bottom card. So do it that way and get 2 cards.
Okay. Okay. You want me to show the cards? It is the
5 of Cups
5
reversed.
of Cups reversed. And then the second card was the Ace of Wands upright.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, we've assumed we've already gone through the first like 5 steps. She's already focused because we've been talking about this. She set the intention, we refined the question, and we picked the spread. And so we're jumping straight into interpretation. And so the best advice, Maru, is 2 things I'm going to ask you. 1, what would you normally say about those 2 cards? What's your existing interpretation? And then we'll look at that first, and then I'll ask you another question, okay?
So my interpretation will be hanging there, like with the 5 of Cups reversed, like hanging there, just be patient. And the second one will be, it's coming, but at the end of that time frame.
Yes, and I would basically agree with you on that interpretation. Now let's refine it, because hang in there and be patient are good keywords, but I use those keywords for a lot of cards. And I try not to. I mean, this is the thing that we're trying to do, is eliminate the super common keywords and allow them to only fit with a couple cards. And so let's refine that 5 of Cups. So take a look at that card. Go ahead and turn it upright so you can see it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we're going to find the action in the card. So what is the guy doing?
He's crying.
He's
well,
crying.
no, he's not crying. He's kind of worried. But there's another action that I haven't noticed before. There are 2 little birds here flying.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's good. That's good. Let's stick with the guy for now, though.
Okay.
Let's just start with his posture. He's kneeling, right? Is he kneeling?
Yes, he's kneeling.
Okay. And
I don't know if I can take a picture of it.
And he's got his head in his hands.
Yes.
And his head is bowed.
Yes.
Okay. And so you said he's crying, and then you said, well, not really crying. Take that one step further. What would you say if he's not really crying? What would you say he's doing?
I think that he's mourning the loss of the cups, but also thinking. Like for me, he looks like, yes, a little worried, but more thoughtful. Like, what are the next steps?
Good. Okay. Good. So we found some really good actions. And so one of the things I stress is the idea of the verbs. Finding the verbs in the cards. Mourning. He mourns is a really good verb. And contemplates future steps is also seems like a relevant thing. Or planning, I think, is maybe what you said. He's planning. So that gives us a much more practical answer. Is there is going to, maybe a current project is going to fall through or already has fallen through. Go ahead and mourn it. But it's also looks like it's a good idea to plan other projects and future projects. And I agree with you on the ace that with the ace, especially Ace of Wands, there definitely is going to be something towards the end of our 6-month time frame, because the aces are new beginnings and Wands is business and enterprise. So new business opportunity is definitely a good meaning for that. But Wands is also energy and excitement and taking action. So the idea of getting involved again, being able to do something, being able to follow your goals. Wands are much more goal oriented. So yeah, I agree with that. I think going back to the birds, I think that they're supporting. Well, I'd like to hear what you think, but I suspect they're kind of supporting the idea of let's leave this and fly on to something else. But I don't know if I'm seeing all the details in the card, so you take a look at that image and tell me what you think.
Yes, they are. The only problem, Joy, and the question is that it actually was reversed. So do I take the action and say, okay, don't cry over it, don't think about it, or do I take the action upright, even if the cards show reversed?
You'll take the action upright, and what I do with reversals, and if you've already got a way of working with reversals that really works for you and that is consistent, I don't suddenly change to my way of doing it. But what I do with reversals is that one of the things is that they slow down timing. But we already saw that ace and we already interpreted it. And sometimes when I get 2 cards and we asked about 6 months, I'll say the first card happens in the first 3 months and the second card happens in the second 3 months. But with the reversal at the beginning and with just an ace as the second card, I definitely am going to push that out to the end of the 6 months, or even the, after 6 months is concluded, the month following that even, it really kind of push it to the outside. And that's one of the things I do with reversals, is that they tend to slow things down. And so they prolong the mourning, they prolong the planning. Some of the other things that happen is the reversals represent things that are internal. And so it's like, what internal processes are you going through? Is there anything that you can do? Now I'm going to say internally, but it also might mean more on a personal or solo level that you can do for the career, just in terms of I don't know why, but the thing that, I don't know what kind of acting you do, but the thing that comes to mind is radio theater, or something that's a little more, you just have to sit at home, kind of cozy to do it. A friend of mine records audiobooks, and she reads excerpts from them every day on Facebook. And she always sits in her bed with her blanket over her lap while she reads from this book, and she always looks so cozy when she's doing it. So that's the thing that comes to mind as like an example of acting that could be done on a really kind of internal level.
Right, which I'm already doing. I have had projects on and off. Okay, got it. I was just, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Another example, anybody else have a question that they want to focus on?
So while Mara was doing her thing, I have something I have a work that's being considered for something.
Okay.
Which I don't want to say too much out loud publicly, but there it is. And so the first card I pulled was the 9 of Wands. There we go.
Hold on just a second.
Less adorable than I might have thought.
Okay.
And the second card I pulled was the Queen of Wands.
Okay, good. Okay, excellent. So tell us, first of all, I'll do the same process with you. First of all, what is your usual interpretation, just like your kind of go-to interpretation for those two cards?
Well, my go-to for the 9 of Wands is that the final battle has been fought. But in fact, there has been a wounding, and as a result of the wounding, he's still guarded. There's caution. The defenses are still up. So depending on what else is going on, the invitation can be either, you really can't accept the fact that the battle's over, and that you're all right, or yes, and the lessons you've learned lead you to be cautious with reason. So I think it would depend on, sort of what else comes up. Okay. The Queen of Wands, I mean, that's a fiery and dynamic person.
Yeah.
A leader full of creative energy. And also, of course, because it's Wands, it's business, it's go-getting, it's creation, it's all of those things are good, particularly since there is a woman who is involved with this, who, if I had to pick a card for her, that would be the one I'd pick.
Okay, good.
So my sense is to be optimistic about the outcome, that my work is done. Not to be completely foolish about running in headlong to whatever it may be, but also to recognize that I don't have to drag wounds from the past into whatever it is that may happen with this event in the future.
Well, and for the most part, I'm agreeing with your interpretation. Where I would deviate is I definitely appreciate the action that you were taking as being guarded. He guards, he defends. And so I would, again, kind of blending, keeping both things present. I would maintain a guarded attitude towards the situation. I'm assuming from part of what you said and part of how you phrased it that it is out of your hands.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, for some reason, we feel like we need to be guarded against the Queen of Wands. And so I would be aware of that, and I would be on the alert for her to contact you about something, that there's something missing, that they need more information from you, I'm not sure what it would be. Be also guarded in terms of Queen of Wands is pretty much kind of a take charge type of person. Sometimes that can get into a little bit of bulldozing if we go towards the shadow side. So maybe keep some of that in mind. One of the things that comes to mind, again, your question is allowably lacking in detail from my perspective, but and it just means that my answer might have to also lack detail, and you might have to just interpret it the best way possible. But the other thing is that assuming that the outcome, if the outcome is positive, there might be a great deal of energy and effort that they expect from you in terms of something that normally you would put up your walls around, normally say no to, normally be guarded about. And so that might be another thing to consider, is that they haven't told you this yet, but there's going to be, or maybe they have, but there's going to be a lot of even though you're waiting now, you might end up being kind of a Queen of Wands later on and having to take charge of a lot of aspects of this that you might not anticipate now.
That sounds dead on. Both in that my personality and hers are very, very different. And also that my initial reaction to all of the work that may come from this is, oh, hell no. But, it's like, oh, yay. And then, oh, hell no, immediately followed by, oh, hell no. So, yeah, that's right on, Joy. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we have time for another one. Does anybody else have a question they want to ask?
Sure. I'll ask a question.
Okay, awesome.
So I am looking at making a huge change in my life.
Okay.
And that was the cards that I kind of pulled last night. But I don't know if how I phrased the question would like I said, it was a yes no question, and the cards that I pulled were the mine's I've got the Mystic Goddess one. So I'm just
gonna the mythical goddess.
Yeah. I'm just gonna go ahead and use the cards that I had. So the first card that I pulled was the
Fire Maiden.
Yeah, the Maiden of Wands, which is the Knight of Wands.
Is the Maiden of... Oh, right. You're right. Yeah.
No, yeah. It's the Knight.
The Knight of Wands.
Yeah, so that was the first one.
Okay.
The second one was the Nine of Wands.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the third one was the Knight of Pentacles.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then the last one was the King of Pentacles.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. That's why I said it was kind of a yes.
Yeah. So I assume, did you do much of an interpretation other than just be like, oh, I got this right off the bat? Did you do any interpretation with it?
Because I love these cards because obviously at the bottom, it gives you, words to kind of work by and kind of go. And since the first one was revolution, like my thought was, okay, we're going to change things up now. And obviously Wands is passion and kind of work within that And then the Nine of Wands, has integrity with it. So, I really kind of, obviously it being a 9 at the end of the cycle, I was like, okay, so I need to steadfast. I need, stay on your laurels, if you will, and keep things, don't waver because of whomever or whatever.
Okay.
And then the Knight of Pentacles, the term that they use on this is beauty. I kind of interpreted that of seeing like the positive of it, seeing that with Pentacles tending to be more financial and moving in that mode, the prosperity of getting back into my work ethic and getting back into that's what I got with the Knight, because he tends to be more the worker and the doer. And then with this, I was kind of like, yeah, so we're at the top of the chain. So financially, this is like the best route for you too. So
yeah.
Ascension, that I was like, okay, so this would be a big shift.
Okay, excellent. One of the first things that I noticed in those 4 cards is that we get 3 court cards.
Yeah.
Out of 4. And that it obviously the second thing, I don't know which you can notice first. You notice things all at least I notice things all at the same time. The other thing that I noticed at the same time is that we have a really distinct fire earth breakdown.
Yes.
And fire is the spiritual level, earth is the practical level. So that's like an immediate, like, boom, instant manifestation combination of cards. And so I'm with you on like a yes, yes, yes. The other thing that I might ask is if it can break down into 2 people. You interpreted it, and I agree with this interpretation, but I just want to bring another viewpoint into play. You interpreted it as you taking the action to initiate the whole thing. That's a wands or a fire thing. And then you being the one to reap the results of that, which is a pentacles or earth thing. And so that is a really excellent tight interpretation. But I'm still curious is if there's another person involved, that if you're playing the wands character, is there somebody else that's playing the pentacles or the earth character?
Oh yeah, and it's funny you say that, because I just got a text from that person, and it was one of those where, like, until you said that, I was like, oh, like that. Oh, I could kind of see that, and so I could see 2 people, one of 2 people in that situation, that and more along the lines of not helping me financially, but helping me financially. Not in the literal sense.
Yeah. Just making things easier.
Correct.
Taking the and that's how I would do it. And that's another, I didn't even address this in the handout's supposed to keep it simple. There's so many things that come into play, but being able to find those other people in the cards, I really do think helps to take it out of the psychological realm, which is it's totally valid to interpret it that way, that you put a lot of effort into something and you are reaping the rewards. That's totally valid, but we get a lot more detail when we say you're putting the effort into it and somebody else is providing the support as an really solid earth keyword. Yeah. And boom, and everybody benefits, and you go from being up in the air, which is a very Knight of Wands. I don't know. Technically it's fire, not air, but still fire to me. I think of fire, I think of all the forest fires we get in Colorado, and it's just like fire goes quickly through the tops of the trees and jumps, and it's unreliable. That's what I think of with fire, and it lets you come back into a more grounded position. So adding that second person in does really help us to narrow that down and help you to keep in mind that part of this part of your answer lies in accepting an invitation from somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the only thing I would question is the two people that I would thought of are both water signs. One's a Cancer, one's a Scorpio. And so, but in the sense when it comes to finances and when it comes to specifically money, like they're sharp as tacks.
And that's all that it takes. And so yeah, I would go ahead and probably interpret it that way. I just glanced at the time and we're at our 11 o'clock cutoff. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up. I know some people need to go and probably have already left. But you guys are welcome to, I can continue talking with Jennifer about those cards. Other people can throw in their ideas on Jennifer's cards or Lauren's or Maru's. I invite you to stay and we can chat for a little while longer, but I do want to bring a formal end to this.